let me ask you, what do you say to the business owner that is reluctant to put their face on the camera and get in front of the camera? If you're dealing with them as a client.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, well, if I'm dealing with them as a client, it's a different story.
Find someone else to do it.
Yeah,
I worked for
I was like paid actors, maybe. I don't know.
Said 1-800 Ask Gary. How many people know what Gary looks like versus what Roz looks like?
What's going on, Sarasota? My name is Brad Hannon.
Trey Martell.
Felipe Colón.
And we've got Caleb Duplain with Duplain Media, who grew his social following from basically 0 to 300,000 followers in 1 year, posting once a week. Is that correct?
Just about, yeah.
I mean, that is incredible. So I think we're going to get into how you did it and whatnot. But before we go there, Duplain Media, what do you do?
Primarily social media growth and then videos that tell stories.
Okay.
So basically, if you have a company or if you are a person with knowledge in your industry, trying to get you out to as many eyeballs as possible.
Well, is anybody even doing that right now? Is that like a real thing or what?
With social media or
I'm being facetious. Everyone's doing that,
oh,
right? Like
good point.
social media, everyone's trying to do that, but you're doing it successfully, right? So
fair.
that's the cool thing. And the reason why I've obviously looked into your content, I love it. I can see why it went from 0 to 300,000 as quickly as it did.
Thank you.
It's real meaningful storytelling, and it does engage the viewer. So I'd love to get into that. Like, what flipped the switch for you? Like, why did you decide to go down that road?
Well, I think it started really with the message of the social media account, which is quite ironic for anyone who hasn't seen it or doesn't know it, which is that the entire purpose of the account is to tell people to stop using their accounts, to get off Instagram, or to use it more intentionally.
Right.
For me, that began just with my own upbringing, I think, and then looking at the people my age around me. I was very fortunate from a young age, like 12 years old, illegally downloading video editing softwares, and like I had this focus growing up, and it just carried so well into my adult and professional life. But I think for a lot of kids going to school, college, they're not really sure what they're going to do or what they're going to turn to or how to spend their time, and there's a lot of confusion. Mm-hmm. And when you're confused and vague about how you spend your time, I think you end up wasting it, and that's what we see a lot now with kids is social media use, video games, et cetera, and I think a lot of them are feeling unfulfilled, not sure what to turn to. I think seeing that everywhere, I wanted to build something that addressed that. I didn't know how. I put it off for years. And there was just for some reason, there's a spark 1 month where I decided I was going to start producing videos for it. And it took off incredibly quickly.
You think it was as much the content, and I'll let these knuckleheads get involved too, but do you think it was as much the content as it was the message? Like, was it a catchy hashtag, in other words, or was that just a sector that hasn't been really tapped into? Or do you think it was truly the storytelling, the messaging, the media, just from your opinion?
I think it's a funny point and question you ask of like, was it a catchy hashtag? Because actually I don't use hashtags
of course,
on my stuff.
It's not a real thing.
There's one hashtag on all of it that has less than 1,000 posts in total on it.
Okay.
So I really do think it was really validating for me as a filmmaker and just a business owner in this industry, where I wasn't making something to please anybody. Mm-hmm. I was making something for myself, for my friends and family, and I was making it in a way where I was spending a lot of time on it. I was treating it very seriously, almost like a part-time job, if not more, and treating it like art, and it naturally grew from there. So I think that just speaks to if you mean it and you're willing to put the work in, doesn't matter what the message is, you can create that.
Genuine. Right?
Absolutely,
that's the word we're looking for.
Yeah, with no goal other than to just spread the message.
I recall the first video that I clicked on of yours. You said, I really didn't want to make this video, but, and then you go into the video, and I'm like, that's the reality of it. How many times I told Eric I don't want to record content, and when I was coming up the elevator today, I was thinking about something. I have kind of ventured away from some of the content that I was creating, and the reason is because I didn't love to do it, right? I started it because it was good for my business, it was beneficial for my business, but I didn't love it. But one thing that it did do for me is it led me to something that I do love, right? Which is owning and operating businesses and that type of stuff. So,
I thought you were going to say Sarasota SpeaX.
Well, yeah, it did lead me to Sarasota SpeaX too. He reached out originally with the idea and said, "Who's doing the content you're putting out?" Because we're trying to, run this podcast and, enter Sarasota SpeaX. So.
We opened the conversation. Well, Brad opened the conversation with how accomplished you are. In what you do in terms of building that following, but which obviously that's great, and I find that interesting. But what I find more interesting is that you did it like we were just talking about, your own way, and possibly a different way than what we see out there. Yes. I mean, frankly, I see a lot of garbage online, and I'm getting a little tired of it, but I still watch it. You can't look away, right?
Sometimes.
How often do you watch that garbage?
I watch it a little less often than you do, Brad.
Okay, fair. That's fair.
But yeah, I kind of think your how and your why is almost more important than what you've done.
Absolutely. I would invite anyone to explore that. Whether you're an individual or an artist or a business, stop looking at like the end result and just start looking at why you're even making it, because there's enough filler as it is. It's 99% of what's out there, and there's a ridiculous amount out there. So you can make a very easy change and be different by just being real.
And also, a business coach online once said, you got to stop consuming it and start producing it. Be the content rather than sitting on your phone consuming it.
At some point, you got to get off the bench and into the game, right? If you're watching the business coach, you gotta eventually take that step. And that's exactly what I did originally. And I didn't know what I'm going to produce content for insurance agents and try to educate them and help and, whatever. But when you said kids these days are kind of scrolling aimlessly and, whatever, I thought, it's almost like kids are turning. I heard something one time that one of the number one, when you're growing up, like, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a firefighter. With the younger kids these days, like, one of the top things is I want to be a YouTuber, or I want to be a content, creator. And it's like, what actually is that? So I love that you're doing it from, a genuine place and whatnot, but let's get into the business side of things, because you're helping businesses, run their social media, grow their presence, grow their brand online. So what are some strategies and things that you use on that side of the business?
Well, I'll start by saying, I think 3 things are true for like every size business. One is they feel like they need to be on social media. They feel like it's an absolute must for whatever reason, whether it's their peers or just what they're hearing online, that they need to be online. 2 is they have no idea how to do it. They hate doing it. They hate putting time into it. It's very confusing. And as a result of those 2 things, the third thing is that they end up feeling like it's a complete waste of time, and it's a really crappy relationship, because it's not a good place to be stuck between feeling like you need to do something and feeling like it's a waste of time and you have no idea how. And I think that's unfortunate, because treating it, I think the way that I've treated it almost as just a journal entry, and you can obviously mold that to be more professional if you're doing it for a business sense. It's such a good way to share authentically with people and to build something more meaningful than just the statistics behind it. And so I think that's really where it starts when I am working with businesses, or if I see it out in the wild and people are doing it really well, that's where it starts, is just, accepting the fact that it might be really confusing. People are telling you to do it one way, to lean into the statistics, the hashtags, the trending audio, all this crap that's frankly trending a complete distraction.
Is the big thing now, right?
Oh my God. Delete the word from your vocabulary if you care about anything good. It's useless. And just instead creating from a place of like, what is your actual mission with your company? Like, what is the long-term play here outside of just the number? Because that is completely meaningless if you have no plan behind it. So that's where it starts.
What do you mean by the number? The number
any
of
the
followers,
statistics,
the number of likes, number
followers.
of likes.
It means absolutely nothing
right,
unless you yourself have a plan of implementation, and I mean that in all ways, of monetization, of greater impact, of engagement with people outside of just the screen.
If you're pitching to a potential client, what would you say some of the benefits are of being prolific on social media?
Number 1 is opportunity and like ease of contact, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people, they're constantly having to like reach out for opportunities they see around them, or like having to get in touch with people about things that are coming up, or if there's somebody they admire that they want to like build a connection with. It's all so much easier to do when you have a following. Like the amount of, just because the number next to my name, the amount of people I can just reach out to and get in contact with is stupid.
Right.
Like it's silly.
For example,
that's an easy one to see.
It helped you get an invite onto Sarasota SpeaX, right?
One of the most prestigious podcasts in all of Sarasota.
Actually,
dreams do come true.
The most in Sarasota. Definitely the most prestigious in Sarasota.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where it starts. But I think number 2 is like, it's a very natural evolution for a lot of people's careers, I think. Like if you're a real estate agent and you've been in the game for, say, a decade or 2, there's a lot that you know about just working with people and about the real estate market and about your craft and your career that only the people in your local community understand and know about.
Right.
There is so much potential in that knowledge that already exists there, but you're just not gaining anything from because you're not putting it online, if that makes sense. So it's like, for a lot of people, it's just capitalizing on the knowledge and things that you already have and making it into something more.
And not overcomplicating it.
Yes, exactly.
Some of the benefits that I saw that I didn't foresee, like, naturally the objection is to get more business, draw in more clients. But some of the other benefits I saw, now a lot more people want to work for me as well. I consistently get reached out by potential employees.
Interesting. I haven't considered that.
It's something to consider when you're speaking to potential clients.
Absolutely.
It also validates. I walked up to a client today and he said, I see you on the internet, in his Russian accent. Yeah. So just cool little things that it helps benefit.
Now, I got to ask, is Caleb the one behind the shoe note, the toe note?
No.
You see that ad?
Oh.
That is a freaking
I've commended him on it, but
that is
it's not
all-time
me.
best. Like,
I had some of my friends talked about that.
Dude, you had to have seen that
because they know he's in my networking group, and they're like, "Dude, that roofing guy, he did that silly video."
Dude, that was so cool.
Well,
was that like a
my
thing that people were doing?
My fiance has some behind the scenes footage of me with my hands covered by a sock, sticking through a pant leg in my underwear.
Oh, you did the underwear too, just to make it legit?
Well, no, I had to take the pants off to put my hand through, and I didn't think it out. I didn't bring an extra pair of shorts.
Never seen before behind the scenes.
Well, they clip in the actual ad, but the funny thing is like anything else, I saw that someone else do it for a different company, nothing to do with roofing, and I reverse engineered it because it caught my eye. So
that's actually a good point. I'll talk about for anybody listening or otherwise that has a business is like one big problem I see is because people see things like trending audio and hashtags, they then look at like the methods of the platform as a source of growth instead of just looking at what other people in a similar industry have done. Like for most of my clients, that's like after I establish their personal goals, that's the next step. I'm like, what accounts do you like that are doing the same thing that you want to be doing? Because I'll just look at what they've done that works and make it but better.
Right.
And then it will perform the same, if not better.
Right.
And so people way overcomplicate it, and they think the algorithm is this like mystical thing that they'll never tap into, but it's not. You just have to understand what works and replicate it.
It's quality content, right? It's being watched. It's being watched all the way through. It's being shared, those types of things.
And there's a structural format to that. I mean, that comes down to the early days of filmmaking. Like all filmmaking follows a 3-act structure in movies, and it's kind of the same way, but in a shorter form.
What is that 3-act format?
Very simply, the hook,
Okay.
which in a film is oftentimes a 15 to 20 minute buildup that establishes who the characters are, putting them into a situation, and them often being reluctant about it. That's what you always hear, any TV show, any movie. You can keep an eye out for it now. You'll see it. They'll be set up into an opportunity or thing they need to face, and at first they'll be like, I don't want to do that, and they'll walk away from it. For some reason, oftentimes a additional character will give them the information or drag them back into it, and that's when the rest of the movie begins. So hooks,
right,
but shorter now,
right,
6 seconds, 9 seconds, right?
So I was going to ask, and not just because
we're only in Act 1, Felipe. We got to get to the second 2.
No, ask.
Not just because you brought a fancy camera in here, but I could tell that you probably had not your typical background for someone who does this type of video work. You have a filmmaking background.
Oh, absolutely.
Which I think
formally trained in filmmaking and digital production.
I think that's something that's unique about you and about how you. It's not surprising that you do some things a little bit differently with your content based on the fact you have your filmmaking background.
That, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit? Because obviously we talked a little bit before about how in your industry and to an extent in my industry, sometimes there's a lot of competition and there's a lot of noise, and sometimes it's difficult to separate yourself from people who, might not know what they're doing at the level that you do.
Okay. We'll come back to Act 2 later.
Well, yeah, don't worry about the second 2 acts. We got the hook.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Besides, the hook is the most important part.
It's the most important part.
Okay,
we'll talk about it later.
To make sure I have your question right, it's what can other people learn from the world of like filmmaking to integrate into their own. How does
your filmmaking background separate you? You know, I mean, we could explain the structure of films, music. You know, that's esoteric. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What's that word mean?
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like this might sound kind of lame and I don't know, vague, but for me, having that background was just about the creative expression of just not worrying so much about performance and just doing it because it like you felt the performance in your heart, like while you're making of like, whoa, this feels good.
Right.
And that actually is like the key difference. I think it's instead of thinking, oh, this is going to perform good, it's like, oh, this just feels right.
Right.
And I think not a lot of people are familiar with that feeling and how to tap into it. And that's like, I think that's a feeling that every filmmaker carries with them and what leads them to make great work. But I'll never forget, like, even though I ultimately dropped out of college to start my business, the documentary filmmaking class I took completely changed how I see films in general, because I always thought documentaries were like, you know, Nat Geo, Planet Earth, these very informative
those are
pieces.
great, though.
They're amazing, but I always thought it was like information based.
Right.
In taking that documentary class, we got introduced to like, you know, some of the documentaries on like Julian Assange and like these other political figures or people who are big names where there's just a lot of controversy. And even some just like completely different ones, like shorter documentaries about like textiles and just random stuff. And it opens your mind up to like documentary or filmmaking as a whole. It's just an opportunity to explore things. And so to answer your question in full, like that freedom of exploring things and then pairing it with that feeling as an artist of like, ooh, this is just, I don't even care what this performs, if it performs well or not. It feels good. It strikes the chord. I think that's the difference.
I think we can relate to that in podcast episodes we've completed. You know, like
sure.
we get done with an episode. We're like, that was awesome. It felt good for us. Like we enjoyed it, whether the viewers enjoyed it or not.
So
really
you know
doesn't
the feeling.
matter at that point because we had a blast and we learned and you know we met some awesome people through this format. So even though we're not filmmaking, I think we can relate to just that feeling of genuine great conversation and I think of like Rich Swire and
that's who I was thinking of.
Like just these things that just come together and it's like we didn't try anything and that's why I really we focus on the intro. How are we going to introduce where then wherever it goes from there is kind of organic. We have somewhat of a structure, but we don't stick to that structure. It's let's flow with the conversation, see where it goes, and sometimes it goes to a place that you didn't realize it was going to go to, and that place was awesome.
The unexpected Act 2.
Yeah,
correct.
There you
Let's get back to Act 2.
Is that what you were going to say? Well, okay.
We have the hook.
Yeah. Right? So
phase 1 hook.
Yeah. So if we're talking films, the
Trey's
hook.
taking notes.
You should. So for films, that's Act 1 is a pretty short period, but it's one of the most important. It's what stops people from walking out of the theater. Like, and this is what I tell people is like, when you're making short form online, as an example, you have to treat it like you need to do anything to keep people from walking out of the theater, aka your video that they could take a millisecond to watch anything else.
Right.
It's different because when you bring someone to a theater, they're not going anywhere unless it's
they got
really
their popcorn
bad.
And
they're like
else.
They got everything else. They're there for the night. You don't have that online, so you have to be really sharp about it and be really in tune with the audience. But anyway, moving into Act 2, it's like this is where the true meat of the discovery of the story in this case in a film, or in the information that you're sharing, or the realization, or whatever business philosophy, et cetera, that you want to share in your short form. Like this is the value section, right? This is where people. They've established in their head, okay, this is worth watching. Now you break it down for them and make it worth their time and make them feel like they gain something, if that makes sense.
Right.
And so that's the whole Act 2 for any film, or in this case, short form. It's just the meat of it. It's just where people go to, get what they came for, basically.
Right.
Go straight into Act 3. What we got?
Act 3 is the ending, right? Any film, I think if they do it well, it's a lot of times, this is actually a good point for short form as well. And I think in some of the best films, some of the most noteworthy films, what makes the ending so great is that it either wraps up perfectly everything that was said before, or it like twists it on its head and you're like, whoa, didn't see that coming. Same thing with short form video. And we see people do this intentionally in like silly little ways where they'll just add this like crazy, unbelievable ending and then it restarts after that. And so you see the same principle carry from like filmmaking to short form of just this completely unbelievable ending that makes you walk out of the theater and be like, holy crap, what just happened?
Well, I'm trying to picture an example of that in short form though.
It's like when I pulled the note out of my shit.
That's a great example.
Oh shit! Didn't see that coming. Yeah. Or maybe you could come up with a better example.
No, that's a pretty freaking good example.
No, but like an example for short form is like, and try and keep an eye out for this now if you're ever scrolling, is like, it's the most oftentimes entertaining part of the video. And I can only speak to like what I might get in my feed, for example, as like a younger person who has a completely different sense of humor. And like, it's true for my entire generation. But like a lot of times in videos geared towards us, it's like this like stupid, unbelievable moment where you're like, wait, that would happen in public? Like what, like how do people react there? But then it like restarts. And so it almost resets your interest in this way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's again, for films, same thing. It's like the reason you want to go back and rewatch the film all the way through.
My initial thought was like, you know, a call to action or something like that. And that's not necessarily the ending that we're talking about here, though.
Well, the call to action is very businessy. You know, like that's for converting people. Yeah. Not always what you want in short form. Because in short form, it's the top of the funnel. It's how you're drawing people in. That's not where you're selling people oftentimes. You can use it for that, but I would say make it a very small percentage of what you're putting out. You can still work it in, but make it a small percentage of what you're doing.
Agreed with that. You mentioned the funnel. You want to explain the funnel to the audience?
Well, I mean, if you're familiar with funnels in any amount in marketing or business, it's just the top of the funnel is just where you're reaching everybody. And that's what short form is. And this is what I warn people about actually who have a business, who like have that the grass is greener mindset about social media and feel like they need to be on it, is I'm like, okay, that's great. If you own a gym, for example, this happened with one of my clients and we learned a lot of lessons from this. If you own a gym, so like Scorch Fitness on Clark Road, are you familiar?
Yeah.
It's next to Livingston's. Do you know the owner, Liz, by any chance?
I do know Liz.
You know Liz?
Yeah.
Not surprised there.
She's from Vermont.
Yes, she is. I love Liz. Liz is a fantastic entrepreneur in person.
Yeah, we're friends. We're good friends.
Great, yeah. So with Scorch, when Liz and I first met, we were producing videos for her gym, thinking on social media it would bring clients into the gym. Big mistake. Like, because people have to realize the algorithm is giving your videos to people in India, Switzerland, Africa,
anywhere.
Literally anywhere in the world. And so you'd be horribly mistaken if you think getting 1 million views globally is going to do anything for your brick and mortar, because nobody cares.
Right.
Unless you sell something digital, right? Or unless you have some kind of remote offer. So that's like a warning I give to a lot of people.
But you still can convert. It's just not good. If you have 1 million views on a short, it might convert to a couple of memberships to those local people.
Yes. But again, it's like you almost have to reprioritize your business goals. A lot of people, if they're starting a social media presence, it's almost like they're building a second business. You know what I mean? And we see this with Dr. Rob's stuff, who was a guest on the show that we can talk about. Like, he has his in-person brick and mortar chiropractor practice. His social media, despite the fact that he has millions of followers almost on everything, does not do anything for that.
Right.
It's, for him, it's like, okay, now I have this second business where I get to monetize my knowledge of helping people so that they don't have to go into the chiropractor.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. But he also created a widget that he can globally disperse, which is his online school.
That's the
or whatever.
Exactly. Yes. But again, it's almost like an entirely separate business. Right. So
and it does. I mean, you said it doesn't do. It does almost nothing. The one thing that it does do is the brand awareness, right? Like the know, like, and trust factor. You know, I go to Dr. Rob and I'm like, or I'm referred to Dr. Rob to Trey. Like, my back's hurting, and I say something to Trey, and he says, you know, check out Dr. Rob, and I'm like, who the hell's Dr. Rob? And I look at his social media, and I'm like, okay, this guy knows what the heck he's talking about, right? Yeah. Like, one quick glance, you're like, okay,
that's fair. People do also use social media in a way to check out brand businesses and people they want to hire and things like that. So it can help with that, but you know, obviously for someone like Dr. Rob, he's getting into much bigger territory of possibilities outside of just that.
Hey, we're having a blast here getting to know Caleb Duplain from Duplain Media. If you'd like to get to know him a little bit better, stay tuned for Rapid Fire Questions.
My name's Caleb Duplain with Duplain Media, and this is Rapid Fire. according to my Spotify Wrapped, Drake.
Like a sprained ankle, boy, ain't nothing to play with.
I'm a coffee nerd. I love it. And that camera is the Sony FX6. Anything that feels like a film. You know, I love every single second of the social network, so I'm just going to go with that.
Did I adequately answer your condescending question?
The boys are back in town. For some reason, the way they piece together in the social network when Mark is being told the valuation of his company is $1 billion.
$1 million isn't cool. You know what's cool? You.
$1 billion.
The way they piece that together always resonates with me.
It's one of life's most important questions. Do you go over or do you go under?
Over. Yeah, I'll go with Breaking Bad. That was one I really enjoyed.
Now, say my name.
Oh. I love filming people. I love filming people and their stories. And I do that here in town.
So, I love how you're honest with your clients about the fact that just having a bunch of views and a bunch of follows isn't necessarily going to translate into business.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that's somewhat business dependent, right?
Yes.
I mean, I don't really care if my orthopedic surgeon has a big social media following personally. I just care that he does great surgery work, and I talk to other peer professionals to figure that out, right? So how do you navigate working with different types of companies, and where do you find that folks who maybe the social media isn't getting them clients in the door immediately, but how do you show them value, and what are they looking for when they come to you?
So, again, I think a lot of people starting out, the reason they come to me is because they have that grass is greener feeling of, I need to be doing social media. And, for some people, that's true. I think, especially realtors in particular, they love social media. No problem marketing to them.
Yeah.
But I think as far as who it's going to benefit the most and what people should be looking for is do I see a bigger play here outside of just the business I'm working on now? Is there potential for me to help other people with this? Is there potential for me to do speaking on this topic or to create a bigger change that I want to see? I think that's a hugely beneficial way to treat it is even if you're a business, I don't care if you're in the lamest business in the world.
Insurance.
I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to say it out loud. But treat it like activism. Treat it like there is a change to be made because a lot of times there is. Not everything is perfect, no matter what the industry. So treating it like you have something to add and you are bringing a force of people along with you to make that change. Yeah. That's a great part of social media and what I advise people.
Speaking on that, one of the roofers I follow in a few markets over in the Orlando area, his big call to action or his mantrage is that they're a roofing company saving the homeowner from bad roofers. So he establishes the problem and sets himself up as the solution.
Yes.
Those roofs better be strong, though.
Fair play.
Better be strong.
Roofs he's doing better be strong.
But I think what you're getting at is something even more and bigger, right? Because you're basically getting at the fact that I come to this business owner and maybe social media and internet marketing isn't going to get more customers in the door for that business, but I'm giving them a new tool and a new power to leverage all their experience and their position in what they do now into doing something more, whether that's another business or some activism or maybe something in the nonprofit space.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? And the other side note I'll say for businesses is sometimes it's just about saving them from themselves because so many people will try and run their own social media having no idea what they're doing or they will hire really bad talent. And then the problem isn't about what potential lies for them. It's what are they messing up right now? How are they ruining their brand image and appeal because they are not doing it well? Right. So sometimes for people who are really insistent and interested in it, it's just about okay, let's just start off with you not doing what you're doing right now and restoring your brand image and making you like a place that people like hold in high value when they see you online.
So what you're saying is when people say there's no such thing as bad publicity, that's a farce.
Absolutely.
All right. I agree with you 100%.
In this sense, yes, absolutely.
Fair.
Let me ask you, what do you say to the business owner that is reluctant to put their face on the camera and get in front of the camera?
Good luck.
Maybe. Well,
if you're dealing with them as a client.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, well, if I'm dealing with them as a client, it's a different story.
Find someone else to do it. I mean, that worked for
like paid actors, maybe. I don't know.
So 1-800 Ask Gary. How many people know what Gary looks like versus what Roz looks like?
I actually can't place an image.
You know, there you go. Yeah. Because Roz, everybody thinks of her. You know.
Well, I think there are ways actually for, and this is kind of like more of my filmmaking background and like commercial filmmaking background. If somebody is really reluctant to be on camera and is bad at being on camera, believe it or not, one of the best ways you can draw out like the best appearance from them is having an organic conversation. You would think they do better with a teleprompter and like this whole scripted thing so they wouldn't have to worry about it. Not the case. And I get this actually a lot from my experience in documentary filmmaking is like just interviewing people and asking them questions.
Long format, essentially.
I have a little trick when I'm filming documentary where I will start recording far before they know the interview has begun while I'm still setting up. And then we just naturally ease into the conversation. And a lot of times they're like, oh, we started rolling, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's been going.
And then the conversation might change a little bit.
Exactly, the tone might shift a little bit, but so it's the same principle of like organic conversation. I think most people, especially if you're in business, are willing and able to do well. So just getting themselves out of their own heads.
Right. If they couldn't do that well, they wouldn't be in business.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So.
and the reality is, you know, when you take most times these days, you're doing long form content simply to produce short form video from it. You know what I mean? Like even a podcast, you know, the clips are viewed so many more times than, you know, the actual long form podcast. Our goal is obviously to drive people to watch that long form with catchy short form videos, but that doesn't always happen, right? So that organic conversation may capture a couple of clips that go a long way.
Well, we've got the expert here. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I mean, that's kind of one of the things we've been going through setting up, but how do you deal with that with clients?
Well, I'll say for you guys, and I see this a lot, because I think a lot of people are really drawn into the podcast world for this reason, because they're like, oh, I knock out 30 birds with one stone. I film a podcast and I can post things for a month.
Yeah.
The issue you run into with this, and what I tell people, the first thing they need to realize about social media once they decide they want to produce on it is you need to just accept the fact that nobody cares about what you have to say or what you're doing, because they have no clue who you are. You have no credibility for them. They will find any reason subconsciously to just swipe past. And so if you... And it's unfortunate that this is the case, but if you take a general route like just doing a podcast and you only rely on splicing that up as your top of funnel approach of reaching people, you risk losing all of the benefits of that more structured thinking and scripted ideas where you could actually generate very real engagement where people are asking where your podcast is, if that makes sense. So you have to develop that trust first.
Give us some examples of how we do that. Some free advice, if you will.
I would turn the question back on you. What is your primary goal with not just the podcast, but the overarching brand, the podcast being a piece of it?
Yeah, I think you just gave us the free advice already. I was listening and I feel like I got something from what you just said. I mean, when you're being very intentional about the short form content, you're never going to get that spicing up a podcast the way you can by scripting something out.
Yes, that's fair.
I mean, was that the advice?
Yes.
All right.
Yes,
so, but I'm asking for like an example of how that works. Like how does that work in action? That plan
Morgan Sarasota Bites is scripted out and it's intentional, versus this is organic and spliced.
Yeah, and I do want to say, like, you guys shouldn't feel bad about just producing the podcast. Like it is a very effective approach, and there's a lot of benefits for you guys outside of just the publishing of the podcast. You get to speak with people.
I'm perfectly happy with it. Brad seems a little sad right now.
No, I'm not. I'm just always looking to improve. That's all, Trey.
Different ways of phrasing that.
I'm stoked about it, to be honest with you. I think you flipped the question back on me, so I'll answer it. I would say that the goal with the podcast is to highlight Sarasota in a way that it's not being highlighted.
Okay.
There's a lot of There's a lot of people that are anti-growth in this community. There's a lot of people that think Sarasota is a sleepy town that doesn't have a lot going on. There's a lot of people that don't realize the massive number of serious entrepreneurs we have in a very concentrated small area. And so our goal is to really just highlight that and to produce something of value that the listeners can learn from. I think if you listen to the first 30 minutes of this podcast and you can't take at least one thing away from it to apply to your business regarding social media, you weren't listening, right? You weren't paying attention. So
or that's Caleb's fault. Maybe.
Or it's my fault.
We blame Caleb.
Business and even just personal growth. I mean, we try to touch on both of those areas just because we want to be of value to all sorts of people who live in this community who would want to listen. But, Brad described it kind of in a nutshell, what we do here. And we talked a little bit about this before the podcast, so...
all right, great. So let's loop back to your personal Instagram and your message and why you chose that message and the overall, what you see with the youth and social media.
Sure. So I obviously talked about how I observed everyone my age. Was that while we were
Which is what, by the way? What's the age?
So
we understand the demographic.
I think my generation, almost exactly, I'm 22.
Okay.
So people, I want to say like 23 and under, didn't know a world where like internet didn't exist.
Social media wasn't like the thing.
And social media, but internet as well. Like the first YouTube videos and all that are like, that was a huge portion of our childhood.
We've really come full circle, by the way, from the Rich podcast where we're talking about the internet coming to Sarasota to now talking about the generation.
Wow.
Yeah, Rich, one of the guests we had on, basically brought the internet to Sarasota.
Holy crap, I got to go listen to that.
Fiber optics or whatever.
Dial-up, not fiber optics. So
fiber's pretty advanced.
Long story short, he was setting up dial-up internet for, family, friends, then it just kind of took off. Then Comcast.
That's got to be a really interesting
Comcast came in and bought him out, said, hey, you've been running for like a year, right? We're going to buy you out, or we're going to push you out of business. And they wrote him an 8-figure check, at like 24, 25 years old, something like that. So, pretty. So,
congratulations on your big Instagram following.
This is why I say it's all vanity metrics, right? What does it really mean? What's behind it?
All right. So, anyways, back to your purpose.
So anyone my age and below, like they simply do not know a world where it is just in-person communication. It's like, I think for millennials and beyond, it's just this added dimension that they find convenient and like interesting. But for mine, it's like just a way of life. It's just baked into our communication and understanding of like personal relationships.
Right.
To an unhealthy,
it's not like an online
level.
Friend versus a real friend. It's like
they are one and the same now.
It's all the same.
Yes, and that's a huge issue that we can talk about.
Right. Yeah, there are a lot of people talking about that right now.
I bet there are. Yeah. But anyway, so the issue I was observing was like, because this is the case, because people struggle so much with it, and because they are so socially intertwined with some of these apps to the point where they simply could not delete them, how are they using their time on them? Like if it's a must-have in their life, you know what I mean? Like in the same way you would look at your diet. Like if I have to be eating, what am I eating?
Right.
If it's not great, that's a problem, and that's going to result in some pretty serious issues on an individual level and like a national level.
Right.
Same is true, I think, for social media. Like on an individual level, some of the graphs and studies of like suicide rates specifically among teens and then specifically among teen girls upon the rise of social media in like 2012, it's insane. It's a skyrocket, which is incredibly unfortunate. But it's just, so these are like the questions I was asking and like just seeing in my friends, not to that severe of a level, but just in like, I don't know, you feel it in people's energy. Like if you wake up and you scroll TikTok for 2 hours first thing in the morning, that's not going to be a great day. It's just not. Like you're setting yourself up for failure. And I think for so many young people, that's just a default. So that was kind of what I was observing and what I wanted to touch on.
And to kind of avoid in your own life. You kind of experienced it
Which
yourself.
is crazy because I wasn't even that bad. Right. And I still struggled with it mentally.
Well, one of the first videos I watched, because I think it is your first video, is the watermelon story. And it kind of talked about, you kind of talked about how, I don't know when this video was produced, but a couple of years before that or a year before that, you were kind of depressed, kind of down, and because you were starting your mornings like that, you weren't really in control of the content you were consuming. And so let's get into that a little bit and what you did to get out of that bad habit?
Yeah, for me, it was honestly video games. And I have this conversation with a lot of people my age because people flip-flop. They think like social media is worse than video games. Like I'm over here like, dude, just video games are so bad. They're so addictive. and research is coming out and like some of the like internal developments of some of the video games is coming out. That's pretty bad. But like for me, it was just a habit I grew up with. Like as a kid, I loved playing video games.
What was your favorite?
Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2.
There you go.
Black Ops 2. Yeah. You know, some of those like Minecraft.
Halo
like,
was before your
Halo. No, Halo reached Halo 3.
Okay.
Dude.
I was big, big Halo.
Yeah.
Like, we had LANs at my friend's house and stuff. Like, dude, it was just, that's all we did. We'd go to the gym, then we would play Halo. And I remember we would drink like just sweet tea after sweet tea. We would stay up from, you know, whatever time we got home from the gym, we would stay up till the next morning. And my friend's dad would come out and he'd be like, what are you guys doing? They're like, hey, can we get some gas money? We're going to go fishing. You're like, you guys didn't even sleep. You're going fishing? Like, yeah, we're going fishing. Then we're going to come back and sleep at, you know, from 12 to 5. Then we're going to go back to the gym and we're going to do it all over again. But that was like life. You know?
Exactly. But then it gets to a certain point where it's like, you're not a kid anymore. You're an adult.
Yeah, we were adults for sure.
Like young adults.
19.
Okay. So
young adults are the fastest growing market for said video games, right? They can now afford to buy them. You know,
more than likely.
Right?
Yeah,
for sure.
And so for me, it was like then that habit carried into adulthood when I like had other things to do and I knew I had other things to do and things I wanted to do, like growing my business, etc. And it's not good. Like you just waking up and playing video games for like 2 hours and then it's like you train your brain to just want the easy thing all day. You know what I mean? Like to the point where like doing stupid stuff like laundry and dishes and just the menial tasks of business become this like hurdle to get across. It should not be.
Right.
But at that time it was. And so I wish there was a easier solution, but for me it was just deleting it entirely. And what made me realize this was I went on a trip to Nashville to visit some family and I didn't have a laptop or anything with me. And I was like, whoa, I can have mornings where I don't touch video games and I'm not distracted and I'm just sitting and relaxing and it can be a really nice morning and day. Like I can survive without this, which sounds incredibly stupid, but it takes that like experience.
But that's self-awareness that a lot of people don't have.
Sure, perhaps. And then I get back in town and I like as soon as I step into my room, I just look at my desktop computer. I'm like, I need to make this change now. Like while I'm feeling good and while I know the direction I need to head and I need to do this now. So literally I just set my bags down, I open up my computer and I just uninstall everything. Like anything I was playing at the time, completely uninstall it. And that was like simply the fix. Like just making it impossible to access.
Right, cold turkey.
That's all it is.
Now we're drumming up all these old feelings. He's gonna go home and
no, absolutely not.
A relapse story.
He's programmed himself differently now.
No, and I do want to say I don't hate video games. I still play them on occasion, but I kind of have a rule for myself of like it needs to be with friends. It needs to be like in the evening, like once everything is done. But kind of like stupidly, it needs to be a game I almost don't enjoy. Like Minecraft for me at this point is kind of incredibly boring. Like there's some times where I'm just like, why do people even play this? It's so pointless. Or like
but it gets me the fix.
One that my friends love is Overwatch.
Okay.
When I play Overwatch, I have no idea what's going on. I like do not enjoy the game, but I play it because I get to hang out with my friends for 30 minutes. And it's a fun time. So like that makes it easy to still enjoy the experience without like getting sucked into it. I find.
So you in that same video though you talked about, or maybe it was a different video I watched, but the way you start your mornings now. So you can't just create a void and not fill it with something, right? So you uninstalled all the programs, you created this void. What did you fill it with? What did you do? What were the action steps towards, the new you?
Honestly, every morning for me, as goofy as it sounds, I'm just in my underwear. I go make a coffee and I just sit down and work in my underwear, like just reducing the time between me getting out of bed and like me trying to get into a productive state. And yeah, I straight up I'll work in my underwear until I'm ready to hit the gym at like 10, like no shame at all, because that's just how it works for me now. That's what keeps me focused. So yeah.
Was it difficult when you deleted everything? I guess when you deleted the stuff, it was mainly just video game stuff. So you
were
still able to work.
Like certain titles in particular that I would like rush to first thing in the morning.
So it wasn't necessarily as much social media as it was the video games.
Well, it's hard because it's like social media was the thing that made me realize the things I wanted to talk about on my account, believe it or not. Just because I think that was the obvious thing everyone else was struggling with. But for me personally, without a doubt, video games was the greatest struggle. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think when we look at, you know, the trend in the social media thing and all of that, you know, stuff, your message is timely. And the conversation that we were having is timely because, you know, Ron DeSantis just passed this bill with minors, essentially. What was it, 14 or 15?
I saw 16.
That's what it was. Yeah, so 16 and under.
This is literally yesterday.
Yeah, I haven't fully explored it, but the gist of it that I heard basically was that, you know, parents, if they request the account for that minor to be deleted, social media platforms have to follow that, you know,
I thought we were talking about regardless what the parents think.
Right.
Well, Morgan.
It's even regardless of parental consent, they're requiring social media companies to delete an account.
Yeah, it's regardless.
Oh, delete. So they're deleting without parents. Okay. Yep. So you said it's
regardless of the parents. It's so just no more accounts for kids.
Probably give it one more time to him.
Ron DeSantis signed legislation Monday that prohibits people under 14 years of age from having social media accounts regardless of parental consent. One of the most restrictive laws.
Now you speak that into the microphone.
So Ron DeSantis rolled out a bill that basically prohibits anyone 14 or younger from having an account regardless of parental consent. My thought to that was the origination of Facebook, right? I still remember Facebook was only for college kids, right? Like it was just for colleges. And I was in high school and I created a Facebook account. And I think I had to say that I was in college or something. So can you not, we'll see, I guess it's early, but they could just probably lie about their age.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be ways to skirt the law or the rule. But the premise of the law, do you think it's a good law to put into place?
Well, I'm not a parent, so it's hard to like completely honestly speak to the subject, like not having kids. But I will say, just from what I've been learning over the past year, like being more involved in the space, like I was talking about before we were rolling, is like what basically studies and like personal experience and just speaking with parents is showing is the longer you can hold that ground and like pull that rope back against your teenager of them having social media, the better.
Right.
For all the reasons, like the social pressures that come in their friendships and relationships, just their reliance on it as like a social tool or like a thing they need to have,
right?
For their productivity's sake, for school's sake,
it'll lessen their opportunity to grow their interpersonal skills, right? Because they're communicating all on these social media platforms, not learning how to communicate.
Yes, or just developing them poorly.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's even worse than that. I was at a Ringling College Lecture Series event like a week or two ago, and the guest was a guy who wrote 2 books. The first one was a New York Times bestseller, and it was about how he helped technology companies create addictive and viral technologies, right? But then for his second book, it's called Indistractable. The guy's name is Nir Eyal, and it's basically about how you can become indistractable and kind of break free from all the distractions that kind of keep us back, including social media.
So he created the disease, now he's selling the cure.
You could say that.
Okay.
It's
a genius.
But no, the guy was a great lecture.
I'm the same way though. Yeah, I produce stuff for clients. Like, it's a dual world. I try and also warn people of it. Like, I think there's a way to coexist in both of those things. It has its incredible benefits. It has its terrible drawbacks, as with anything. So.
Yeah, I definitely thought of you when after I went to that lecture. But the reason I bring him up is because we're on this topic specifically with kids. And, he's a dad, and he said the most important chapter of my book is the one that I did on children and parenting, right? Yeah. Which that really struck me. He's a bestseller. He wrote several chapters in that book, and that's the one that he's really hanging his hat on.
Sure.
Because the kid's the future, right? It sounds cliche, but it's true.
Yeah.
Well, nowadays they have like what I'll do for my son. He's 5 now, so he's not old. He's probably old enough to get the watch, but they have like watches that essentially you can text your parents and only your parents.
Oh,
nice. It shares locations. You can see the location. They can't get on any social media. It's a watch, so it's not a phone.
Yeah.
And I think that does the job, right? So something like that until they're 15 and legally even allowed to have social media now is a great idea. And I think your advice, even though you're not a parent, is holds true, like keeping that as long as you can. And it's the same, and we do it now with iPads, right?
Yeah.
We try to avoid, screen time as much as humanly possible. There's occasions where we're at dinner and it's like, okay, we would like to have a conversation here. So here's your freaking tablet, right? We'll see you in 30 minutes, but you got to limit that stuff.
What about long car rides? You give it the tablet to the kid?
Not really. I mean, we do a lot of camping trips and we'll set up like a movie. We'll set up a movie on my center console sometimes, but again, it's one of those things where until we absolutely need it, because they're both screaming and crying in the back seat, we're going to try to avoid it, right? We're going to say, hey, let's play I Spy. Let's do the things we did before we had screens, before we had
So how
technology.
do you balance that between not wanting the kids addicted and reliant on social media and technology versus you don't want to create a dinosaur? You want your kid to be able to operate in a world that's technology is advancing.
I think for me personally, my goal is to get my son into it as a producer of content and not a consumer of content, right? So we all remember the time when he was in the studio over there. So I mean, I've at least 5 times since he was in the studio watching a podcast. I've talked to him about, hey, would you want to talk on a microphone in a camera, like to nice. Talk about the things you love? Because I would love for him to create content versus just consuming it, because then you become, almost a part of the solution and not the problem, because he's doing something about, and it's fun. And it's fun, and you're teaching him you're teaching your child not to worry about what everybody else is doing, what everybody else thinks, but just to do what you love to do, and that genuine content that we talked about. I would love to go into from here. I'd love to go into some of the things that you have in the pipeline, like you had talked about wanting to create some documentaries, socioeconomic issues and things like that, and that's exciting stuff. But what are you working on now?
I'm glad you asked, because I was going to try and plug this anyways. There's a guy named Max. I forget if it's Stossel or Stossel, one of the two. He works for a company called The Social Awakening. He used to be one of the guys back in the day who was responsible for developing some of the features that we see now, things like autoplay on YouTube and all the streaming
notifications, stuff like that.
All, you go down the list. And he started this organization, again, called The Social Awakening, where he essentially goes around to schools around the nation and talks to kids and parents about how this stuff is designed, his own experience with it. Like he talks about same Halo experience. He'd be like, if you ask me, did I like playing Halo? Yes, of course, I would play it all night.
Right.
And then if you asked me, how did I feel when I played Halo, it would be a different answer. It would be a different question.
Right.
And he has so many great points that he talks about in his presentations with kids at these schools. And he actually reached out to me, again, ironically, through social media, because somebody had sent me one of his videos.
That's dope.
And he's like, dude, there's so much demand for this. Like, schools need it so bad.
He saw some of your content?
Somebody had sent it to him.
Okay.
And he's like, I'm one person. Like, I'm the only one speaking right now. I don't, the parents and the teachers don't know how to talk to kids about this. They need somebody who's, young, that they can connect with and, understand, who speaks their language, who is going to, not try and, persuade them and run up, a certain way of thinking or an agenda or anything, but just give them information, ask them questions about how they feel, and let them choose and let them react organically and just see how they feel about it.
That's really smart, because this is a problem we're all going to be dealing with, whether we like it or not. Yeah. And it seems like the guy who contacted you, he contacted you because you can kind of meet them where they are.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what he's pointing out.
And kind of get to that point where they're informed enough that we can create a cultural shift.
Yeah.
Right? These kids are going to grow up, right? If we knock them just a little bit in this direction, in 10 years, they're going to be on a different course.
Yeah. And if you go to some of these presentations, I just recently shadowed him in New York at one of the schools, and it's incredible, actually, how, interested the kids are in this. You would think they'd be like, oh, come on, we love, Snapchat, leave us alone, blah, blah, blah. But, when you actually talk to them and you ask them these questions in the right way of Snapchat streaks, for example, right?
Yeah.
You familiar?
Yes.
I don't have Snapchat, but yes, I'm familiar.
Okay, so if you ask the room, how many of you guys have Snapchat streaks? All of their hands go up. Every single one of them.
And they protect those fucking streaks.
And they laugh about it, and it's just a joke. And then you ask, how many of you guys enjoy doing Snapchat streaks? And nobody puts their hand up. nobody actually enjoys
nobody
doing
gets
it.
like any good feelings from it.
It's this stupid social obligation
They're
with no
obliged,
intention or purpose behind it whatsoever. And so when you like frame it in this way where they get to choose for themselves and like have these own realizations and kind of show them what's behind the development and design of these apps, a lot of them open their eyes up to it, and a lot of them will take a challenge of like, they'll go to their parents and be like, take my phone for a week. Like, lock me out of it. Don't let me have it.
I like to meet those kids.
Yeah.
Those are some smart kids. Those are going to be Harvard grads.
Yeah. But it makes sense because those kids have come up in a time where they've learned to question lots of things.
That's true,
I mean, they're probably also asking similar questions about processed food.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they're asking a lot of important questions.
What I think of, you know, when we're talking that topic and how interested the kids are, I think of like, you know, religion and the difference between, you know, beating somebody over the head with your Bible and saying, you can't do that, you shouldn't do that, you like, this is bad, whatever. You ask more of the question of like, why do you do this and how does it make you feel? And is there a better way, right? Like you ask it and you approach it more from like thumping them over the head with it from instead of that as more of a educational opportunity and making it entertaining. And I think they're engaged because at the end of the day, it's whether you're talking about it in a negative light or a positive light, you're still talking about a very hot button topic for kids, and that's social media, right?
Yeah.
So
again, that's almost their entire world.
Makes a lot of sense. Are you born and raised in Sarasota, or where are you from?
I am essentially a Florida boy. I was born in San Diego. I moved to Florida when I was 3, grew up in Clearwater, and then high school age, we moved to Sarasota because my parents were having my little sisters, and we had family.
So you've been here for a little while.
Florida for like what feels like my entire life. Yes.
So I think you are educated enough, then you've been here long enough to answer the question that Trey has for you.
So Tom in Interlaw wants to know, what are your thoughts on roundabouts? Do you love them? Do you hate them?
I enjoy 99% of roundabouts. I think they're efficient. There's a few of them in town that are so small, I don't understand why they even exist. They just put a new one in heading into the village towards Siesta Key, where it's like, why is this even here? You can hardly get the turn radius right because it's so tiny.
Is that the one right before where the gas station is? Like, I think it's a gas station.
Into the village where there's like the old Salty Dog.
Yeah.
All those different.
Went around it this weekend. I guess I didn't even realize it was a roundabout.
Exactly. It's like maybe they know something I don't, but they're kind of a pain to drive through sometimes. Otherwise, I'm all for them. I think they're efficient.
Fair. Well, you work with a lot of great content creators. You work with a lot of local people. I feel like that are probably doing some awesome things that would be great guests for the podcast. So we always wrap up every episode with who you would recommend to get us on the podcast, because as Felipe likes to say, if you don't know them, you don't know them, right? But if they get on the Sarasota SpeaX podcast, Sarasota will inevitably know them because everybody watches this.
Yeah, absolutely. Every single person, regardless of whether or not they live here.
Whether they have social media, whether they have internet access or not, they're watching Sarasota SpeaX podcast.
Exactly.
Guaranteed.
Yes. So who are my two people? My two recommendations?
Whoever, yeah.
You can have 3 if you want.
3?
We're not holding back.
Cool. Okay, number 1, I've mentioned her earlier, Liz Lowe. She owns Scorch Fitness on Clark Road. She is an absolute beacon of light in the fitness industry as a whole, which is why I have her on social media. She's been doing really well on that recently. But one of those people who I'm just like, everyone needs to know about you, even though she already knows a ton of people,
right?
Especially in the business space. So like, if that's something you guys are interested in talking about.
Well, Felipe knows her, so we'll get her on.
Get her on ASAP. I can literally text her as I walk out the door.
There you go.
And then the other one would be Jamie, who owns the Dancing with Clayton Foundation nonprofit, purely because her mission is incredible. And same thing, I'm just like, how are you not like this huge organization with how brilliant you are? And funny enough, like these are the things I look out for when I'm like, you would be good on social media. It's just like, how do more people not know about you? You're so amazing. She's one of those people who I'm just like, they deserve to be so much more known than they are.
What is the organization?
It's called Dancing with Clayton Foundation. They help families who are dealing with childhood cancer. Oftentimes it sounds like for her it's about building experiences for those families because there's so much they have to go through. So they, send them on trips, organize like vacations and stays and stuff for them to just be together and enjoy each other's.
That is something we try to do, is get a nonprofit on like once every month and a half or so. Just reach out to a great nonprofit. Most recently we had SRQ vets. So that was an interesting story as well. But
I would even put it a little differently. This area of the country is a nexus for nonprofits, foundations, and just a lot of money going into charitable causes.
Absolutely.
So that's a huge part of the behind the scenes economy here that people also don't see. That we also want to highlight.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, did we cover everything? Is there anything we missed that you want to throw in there before we wrap up?
Mike's yours.
There was something before Trey was so excited about moving on to my personal story that when we were talking about short form stuff for you guys, but I've forgotten it at this point. It might have to be a text later on.
Yeah, we can talk offline. No big deal. We really appreciate you coming on. It was super insightful. I think the viewers will honestly get a lot out of this. How do people reach out to you? How do people contact you?
You can follow me on all the stuff, hopefully it won't be too hard to find. Caleb Duplain at CM Duplain on Instagram. I'll tell you to get off your phone every once in a while if that's what you're looking for.
There you go.
My business account is just Duplain Media. Just text me. Tell me what your experience with social media is. I'll be curious to hear.
Well, thanks for joining us, buddy. It's great to meet you.
Appreciate you.
Glad to be here, guys.